We're going to go now to Chair of the Red Meat Profit Partnership, Malcolm Bailey, joins us now. Good evening, Malcolm. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Sarah.
Hey, I was really stoked to get news of how positive the funding into the Red Meat Profit Partnership has been in terms of that flow-on effect back into the pockets of farmers. Can you tell us about how you commissioned this research and what the outcomes were?
We used a firm called Scarlatti to do the analysis, which is draft at this stage because the real measurement of the effectiveness of RMPP will be measured in 2025. But at this point, it's showing a very strong return from the investment made by our various partners and the Crown. And we're very pleased with that. And in some respects, a return of $17 for every dollar invested looks too good to be true, and so we asked Scarlatti to really validate that by looking at it in another way, and that way was asking them to look at the difference between the top performing farmers and the farmers that aren't in the upper echelon and see what the difference in profitability was between the two, and we find that our returns are actually a comparatively small part of that difference, meaning that there's every reason to believe that this is a genuine return.
For those who are unfamiliar with the Red Meat Profit Partnership's vision and outcome originally, take us back.
Okay, well, the whole concept is that we've got most of the major meat processors plus beef and lamb plus two banks, Rabobank and ANZ, as our partners. And the concept was to really try and get farmers who aren't performing at the highest level to and get closer to the top performers. And we also aim to also offer benefits for the top performing farmers as well. So the whole concept really is just lifting performance across the sector at farmer to farmer level. That's coming through with the action groups that we've formed, and the whole idea is to share best practice and actually form action plans so that you follow through on good ideas and see that flow through to the bottom line of the farm business.
We're going to be joined by Grant Bunting from the New Zealand Roundtable for Sustainable Beef towards the end of the show, Malcolm. And the New Zealand Farm Assurance Program has certainly been one of the projects that the Red Meat Profit Partnership has been working on. Providing benchmarks, have you found that being a very tangible, productive way that farmers can actually set goals when they can actually compare with each other?
Sure. You know, there's an old saying, what you measure, you improve. So you actually do have to measure things and generate data, benchmark against others and see how you're performing relatively. And if you're a bit behind, there's an incentive to and a target you can set to do better. And so benchmarking is very, very important.
And of course, in regards to the strategy of peer support as opposed to being talked to, must have also be rewarding to see that it is reflecting in those numbers.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that while, you know, a lot of us farmers are very confident around things we do, there's a need to get reassurance around some of these new ideas. And when it comes to spending money, I think farmers quite rightly say, well, I'm not just going to throw money at someone's great idea. I want some more assurance than that. And I think working with other farmers that may have already been there and done that is really important. So that peer group that the farmers are in, they choose to be in a group with people they're comfortable with and they share common goals. And in many cases, and this is particularly relevant to some higher performing farmers, that they've formed groups focused on looking after their catchment, so water quality and, you know, what's best practice around that. So there's a wide range of things, and it might be a target for a year or two to work on something and then reset targets with a new goal. And it's a living thing, and one of the key things of the RMPP overall program is that we wanted to ensure that these things will carry on beyond the funding life of RMPP. We don't want a flash in the pan. We want this to be a step change for the sector where farmers end up better off.
It's interesting that you brought up there about catchment groups because, of course, funding into this is finite. But also, too, we are discussing a lot in terms of multi-land use and not being segmented into silos of red meat, dairy, arable, etc. And the merge of catchment groups as that peer support community group around that, because there's a lot of things that we've seen sheep and beef guys have learnt from dairy in terms of pasture management, etc., and vice versa across other sectors. How can we start to merge this style of learning collectively together so we're not doing duplication?
Yeah, a feature of RMPP has been the overall collaboration with the dairy sector as well on some of the topics we've worked on. And I think you're making a really good point that we want to make sure that best practice is shared, and it need not be just a red meat issue. It can go far wider, and we've got to take a New Zealand-wide approach to these things. And, you've got other stories tonight with a minister who's driving some change, and these are big impacts on us. So the more we work together, the better from my point of view, and that means being prepared to share and pick up from others.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had John Leyland Pino on chairing the Freshwater Leaders Forum last night, and his whole approach was the top performing farmers, like you refer to, from an environmental standard, which in turn he referred to as economically the top, trying to basically get the bottom to come up. Is there incentive for that from a profitability perspective? Or are we going to continue to see larger farms just get larger as it gets too hard and the smaller farming families fall out the bottom?
Well, I think if we look worldwide, there's been a trend for average farm size to continue to increase, and that's driven by a number of factors and technology, and bigger machines on some farms can be way more productive than small machines on multiple farms, this sort of thinking. So there's a trend there that we can't buck, but I have to say personally, I think that the so-called family farm concept we have in New Zealand has served us extremely well, and I for one would like to see that continue, albeit it won't be quite the same as what we've had back in time. And we have seen consolidation of farms into bigger ones and less farming families overall, but our objective is to work to lift profitability, productivity. They often go hand in hand, and that's the best thing we can do for keeping things family farm oriented, I think.
Malcolm, lastly, before you go, I do want to talk around this being a part of succession too, because when you talk to the likes of Conrad at Property Brokers and people that are involved in the future farm ownership models and how things may change around succession, and that a lot of the younger generation coming through don't see farm environment plans as a threat to profitability and all of this types of regulations going on, and that potentially can be opportune. Are you sort of starting to see that through that and who's participating within these groups, and that there is, like a positive sort of, I know there was an older farmer who said he got a second wind having an involvement with that younger youth, etc., around some of these issues and how it was possible to farm through.
Yeah, look, there's all sorts of outcomes, and we actually, within RMPP, we have had succession planning seminars, particularly our banking partners have been keen to run those, and I think there's a whole mix of things, but succession is something that can be really tricky with farms, but it's our view that it's healthy to provide opportunities for the next generation, and helping people figure out best way to do that is very important. And there's nothing magic. We've got quite old farmers who are performing at a great level, and it's not about them having to move on. It's working with them and others to, as you said, some of that crossover between younger and older people is very positive. So there's no one size fits all here, and we just really want to promote people to think about what they're doing, how they're going about it, and making sure that they have an enjoyable life as well. That's really critically important.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Malcolm Bailey, Chair of the Red Meat Profit Partnership. And fantastic to see that funding will continue for the next 6 months. Of course, with COVID being a huge interruption, because as the report out has said, it's going to contribute to an increase of over $100 million by 2025 into on-farm profitability. Fantastic to see that is a part of our future.
This is Sarah's Country.